Hello, everyone, and welcome to What's Up Doc, an initiative developed by the University of Michigan Office of Postdoctoral Affairs. What's Up Doc is a professional development interview series created to support the career exploration efforts and professional development needs of current postdocs. You will hear from former postdocs discuss their own postdoc experience and share advice on their experience transitioning into their career of choice. We hope you will get the answers you want and need to make an informed decision about your own career. I am Anne-Sophie Bohrer.
And I am Maureen Bonnet.
Today, we are joined by our guest, Dr. Emily Sherman. Emily obtained her PhD in chemical biology from the University of Michigan in 2020 and completed her postdoc in the Michigan Medical School in 2021. After her postdoc, Emily joined Takara as a territory manager, where she is now an accounts manager. Welcome, Emily, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you here. So, Emily, like Anne-Sophie said, you are currently working at Takara. So I guess the first question would be, could you briefly tell us about your company? What are you guys doing there?
Yeah, for sure. So Takara Bio is a Japanese company. We have a wholly owned subsidiary in the US called Takara Bio USA. We think of like Thermo as kind of the Amazon of the life sciences reagents company. Takara is like a smaller vendor in that same space. So at the core, we're an enzyme company. So a lot of people know us for things like polymerases, cloning, next-gen sequencing, but we've really expanded into a lot of other areas like cell and gene therapy, kind of anything molecular biology we have reagents for. So we have thousands of products all across kind of the life sciences.
Great. So, Emily, let's go back to 2021 when you transitioned from a bench position to a sales role. So, how did you choose to pursue this career and when did you make that choice?
Yeah, so what's funny is sales was really not on my radar at all, admittedly, when I was, in my training for PhD and postdoc. I didn't even really know that it was an option, to be honest with you. My only experience with sales reps in the lab would be like, the pipette people, the glove people that kind of just come barging into the lab and ask you who you're getting your plastics from, and they leave a flyer or something and leave. Um, so a recruiter actually reached out to me for my current role. And honestly, when she first called me and asked, is this something you've ever thought about as a career? I was kind of like, no. Like honestly, I was not sure if I was interested, and she was like, just let me send you the job descriptions, what kind of person Takara specifically was looking for. And they were interested in like someone with a science background, a PhD. So, it was really tough times. Like I defended my PhD in 2020. And I did a postdoc with my mentor kind of knowing he was just opening his first lab, and he really knew the whole time that, I was really just looking for my next position. Um, so I was kind of job searching. It was during the pandemic. It was just a really tough time to find jobs, much like it is now, to be totally honest with you.
Mhm.
So, this recruiter reached out and I was like, at least, it would allow me to stay here in Michigan. I was looking to move into industry and I did not want to move to the coast. So a lot of times if you want a career in like R&D, in biotech space, you kind of have to move to like San Diego, San Francisco, Boston, maybe New York. And I really wanted to stay here in the Midwest, and it's a lot of like small startups, and it's kind of tough to find positions in the Ann Arbor area specifically. So that's why I was open to this recruiter when she talked to me, and I looked through the job description when I looked at the salary, quite honestly. Um, all of those things, I was like, this sounds like something that I could take a leap for. And worst case scenario, if I hate it, at least I can spend a year or so like making some good progress paying off my undergrad student loans. So it was definitely a leap of faith and like not something that I was planning for, but it has worked out. I've been here for like 4.5 years now, and I'm really loving it. So
That's a very nice story. So it sounds for you it was not necessarily a whole plan about like transitioning into sales. But if somebody is listening right now and they already know they would like to transition into sales, how do you think they should navigate their transition? Are there any opportunities that you might be aware of that you can combine that with your current postdoc to be more ready and prepared for this type of roles if no recruiter is coming after you, like in your case?
yeah, I will say I do feel like I got lucky with kind of the timing and having this recruiter reach out to me. And I'll just as a side note, I will say I remember, being a postdoc and PhD student, listening to these same kind of career panels, and like every time the answer from the candidate was always like, it's always very serendipitous how these people end up in their roles. And they're like, well, I don't really know how I got here. But looking at other people, I guess, that have these type of roles, the only other thing I would say that could potentially be useful, particularly if you're really interested in like climbing the ladder, so to speak, like the corporate ladder, thinking of being like a VP or a CEO or something like that in this space, having an MBA or some sort of formal like business education could be helpful, or maybe something along the lines of like, I know the Tech Transfer Office does some fellowships and training programs and things of that sort. So that could also be useful. miLEAD consulting, I know that's something that some of my peers did, and that could also be useful. I could see how that could help.
Yeah, that's great ideas. Thank you.
Hmm.
Great. So, as I mentioned earlier, your role within the company evolved since you first started. So, you initially started as territory manager. Can you explain what this role is, what it means, but also what was an average day in the job is or was like at the time, really right after you transitioned after your postdoc?
Yeah, for sure. So for anyone who's unfamiliar with these sales role type of positions, they can come under a variety of names. Some companies would call it a territory manager. Some people call it an account manager, account executive, key account manager, maybe regional account manager, something along those lines. Essentially, what I do is I oversee a territory. I cover Michigan, Minnesota, Indiana, and a small portion of Ohio. And so all of the institutions, of course, academics like University of Michigan, Michigan State, and beyond, as well as like small biotech companies, government, biotech and pharma, hospitals, diagnostic companies, all different kinds of accounts, large and small, in my territory are managed by me. And so what that means is I'm their primary point of contact for just about anything that they may need from Takara. So that could look like anything from just sending someone a simple price quote. It can look like managing contracts with the larger institutions and universities. In my day-to-day meetings with labs or individual customers, it could be like giving product recommendations, answering, small questions like, is X product compatible with my sample type? Or will this work for this experiment? Just kind of connecting those dots and helping point people in the right direction. So really, my responsibility is to kind of take care of all of these accounts, all of our customers at all these different accounts, as well as to, be the expert on our products, I guess I would say. So we have thousands of products, which is a lot. Um, but, my job is to kind of be familiar with all of them so that I can make the right recommendations and things like that for my customers. So it's kind of like running your own little business, you could say. Like my territory is, it's up to me what I want to do. If I want to focus on certain account types, targeting things for growth, that sort of thing. It's really up to me how I choose to do that and to grow my business, which is really fun. It's a challenge, but it's a fun one, and it's fun to sort of work for yourself. Like I do have a manager, and of course I work for Takara, but um, I also like work for me, which is fulfilling, I would say.
Cool. Thank you.
Mhm. So you said that it sounds like very fun to do this type of job, but also kind of challenging. And so I would like to follow up on that. I think we're interested in knowing what would you say are the greatest challenges that you have faced in this position, and because it sounds also fun, what are the biggest reward of your job?
Yeah, so it's very different from bench work for sure.
I can imagine.
And I will say that was one of my biggest hesitations with taking this job is like, I've just spent so many years doing research. I had done all kinds of teaching, like written grants, done all this hard work over the years, and I'm like, am I sort of throwing this away by switching over to, a career in sales? There's maybe like a little bit of a stigma about going into sales specifically. I feel like my brain is challenged every day for sure. And some of the big differences would be like now, I feel like when I was at the bench, one of the hardest parts was like keeping up with the literature, reading papers and keeping up with everything that's going on in our field. Um, I don't really do that anymore. We do some journal clubs and things like that from time to time. But now it's more like keeping up with our own products as well as like our competitors and like other companies in our space. So, first and foremost, I have to have at least a basic understanding of all of those. The very popular products that are used a lot, I have to have a deep understanding of, as well as just being able to understand what's kind of happening in the broader market space. Like what other, systems and technologies our customers are using, what kind of problems they might be seeing, and just saying like overall informed, I would say, is um, a challenge because everyone's always, pushing the boundaries, launching new technologies, things like that. And it's much like research, it's a lot to keep up with. And the other thing is, I manage a pretty big territory. So, just talking about this role in general, if you are in this type of role for Thermo, you might just cover like University of Michigan. We're more mid-sized, so I cover 4 states, like I said. And then if you were to work for an even smaller company, there are other reps that I've met that cover like the whole country or half the country. So that's kind of the range of what you could be working with. And so my territory is somewhere in the middle, but it still feels pretty large because I have about 100 accounts, and it's just a lot. A lot of people, a lot of different customer types, anything from like a CEO level to like a graduate student, doing all kinds of different projects and just switching your brain back and forth in those ways can be tough. So it's a lot of quick learning and like staying up to date on things.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all of that. That's very interesting to learn more about your job. So I think for people in the audience now that you finally convinced them that a sales job is amazing, uh, what would you say are the skills, either technical, transferable, interpersonal skills that you did leverage from your graduate and postdoc trainings that helped you to land your first job and that you think are like really essential to succeed in your career and be comfortable in the job you're doing?
Yeah. So something that a lot of people told me that I believe to be true is that really getting your PhD, and even part of your postdoc, you could say, although a postdoc is a different level, but you're really just learning to learn. And it didn't really click with me until like later, but it's very true, I think. Having a PhD essentially means that you are able to, you know, s- come into a new project, a new lab, what have you, and you might not know how to get this project done on your first day, but by the end, you know what you know and what you don't know. You know how to figure it out, what resources to use, things like that. Um, and by the time you are done with your PhD, you should have that confidence that, even if you don't know everything you need to accomplish something, you can figure it out. That's a huge part of the process, I think. And that is very applicable in my job today. Like, there will be things that come up, new products, or I might talk with a group who has questions about their project, and maybe I don't fully understand what they're doing the first time they tell me about it. But I know that with my background, I can figure it out and kind of connect the dots. So I think just having that general learning how to learn ability is very important because, again, there's just a lot to constantly be keeping up on in this role. The other thing I would say is just having good, like, time management, being organized. Again, it's like a lot of different customers that we work with, a lot of accounts, a lot of products, and it's just a lot to keep track of. But again, in my PhD, like, I was never just working on one project. You always have multiple things going on. And similarly, you just have to kind of stay organized, stay focused, make plans for yourself, and like use your time effectively to get it all done. So I would say those are the major skills. And then of course, the scientific background helps me every day. I will say compared to some of my colleagues who don't come from an actual research background, it is much easier for me personally to like make good progress with customers, understand what's going on, and like be able to problem solve, having done a lot of these experiments myself. Whereas someone who only has maybe a business background, like the sales aspect might be easier for them, but the actual relating to those customers, understanding exactly what they're looking for and what they're doing is much harder to grasp without a science background. So that is one thing people ask me a lot is like, do you think that your PhD was necessary for your job? And I say, hands down, absolutely. I don't think I could do this without it. And like, I don't think I could work in sales for like some other industry that I wasn't familiar with. Like, this is a very niche and specific area of sales, and like I definitely lean heavy into the technical side of that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Thank you. So initially you mentioned that you were contacted by a recruiter during your postdoc. And so as we learn more about your job, your career in the sales field, can you talk about your experience with the application and the interview processes? Is there any advice that, you can share with current postdocs who, would like to pursue a similar career, things they need to know about? But also from the standpoint of being contacted by a recruiter, in your opinion, did it make things easier? Was it just a way for you to be aware of the position that you clearly would not have been aware of before?
Yeah, so it's been 4 or 5 years since I was contacted for this role, but I still get contacted by recruiters on LinkedIn today. And I kind of always follow this. I guess my first piece of advice would be, one, if you're job searching, you can turn on your open to work feature on LinkedIn that helps people find you. But, you know, it never hurts to take a call from a recruiter. The time that I was looking, I had plenty of recruiters reach out, and I will say, definitely more than half of them, it was like not relevant. They were looking for more of like a bachelor's level, like maybe hiring for a technician position, something that was not a fit for what I was looking for. And that's okay. I think it never hurts to, give recruiters the time of day because you never know when you will be looking for a position, and just
Mm-hmm.
being connected with them and having actually answered their message at least, bodes well for you. And then ultimately, it's up to you to decide either once you've been through the interview process or once you've seen the full job description, whatever it may be. It's up to you to decide if you're interested or not. And if it's a no, that's totally fine. That's exactly what I did with this role. I did a phone screening essentially with that recruiter. And then as far as the interview process you asked, I believe I had 3 interviews with Takara folks. So the first one was with my current manager, the hiring manager. The second was with another manager on the sales team. And then the last one was with our VP of sales, so my boss's boss. And then, I received an offer after the third interview. And the recruiter's advice to me, which I appreciate, was if you're going to do the interviews, let's do the interviews. And you can decide at the end, if you don't want the job, if you're too scared or it sounds like not your speed or whatever, you don't have to say yes. But just get that offer in hand. Like it feels good to have options. Yeah, so that's what I did. She was immensely helpful to me in preparing for interviews. Like I'm still very grateful to this recruiter because no one has spent this much time with me, like actually preparing me for interviews. We talked before each one. Um, and a lot of her tips, like I'll never forget, actually. Um, Something that I recommend for anyone is like if you've heard of the STAR method for interviews, that's a very good strategy.
Yes.
Like essentially the biggest lesson was to just like be over prepared. You never want to be underprepared for an interview. It is like such a bad feeling to get in an interview and have someone ask you a question and you're like, oh crap. Like, I totally could have looked this up beforehand, but I didn't. So that's my biggest advice is to just over prepare for every interview. And when you're in the interview process for any job, treat it like it's the job and you really want it. You might be interviewing for multiple jobs, but to that hiring manager or whoever you're with, like this is the only job. You're super interested, like you are all in until you get to the end and you get that offer.
Mm-hmm. Always keep
So,
your options open.
Yeah.
yes, especially in this economy.
Oh, I know. I really feel for anyone job hunting right now because it is tough out there for sure.
Actually, now you're saying that, what would you like to tell your past postdoc self about the job search?
I don't know. I guess it would just be
Keep going. You got
yeah, exactly. Like I wouldn't change a thing because, I took some calls from recruiters, got some interview experience and I value it all. And my only advice would be to just, take the leap of faith, I guess. And that's what I did.
Mhm.
And I really don't regret it. I would say the biggest thing to myself or anyone is you can always change course. Like I remember every decision feeling just so permanent, like choosing a lab, I'm going to be stuck here for many years. Choosing a job, I kind of had the same mindset of like, well, this better work out for like the rest of my career, but that's not actually true. Like you can always change course if you're not happy. You can see what other options are out there. I'm sure if I wanted to go back to the lab, like I still feel like I could pick up a pipette like today and set up a PCR. Like I know I could still do it all. So, if you decide something's not for you or if your life circumstances change or what have you, it is never too late to change course. So,
I'm glad your experience with recruiter works out well. That's not the experience I have, but it sounds like you just need to find a good one.
yeah, I mean, I will say too, I've also spoken to plenty of recruiters that like were not good or just were, clearly didn't do their homework. And I'm like, why is this person even calling me? Because I'm so clearly not a fit for this, or whatever it may be. So they are not all gems, but, taking 5 minutes to just find that out can never hurt, I guess.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was all really interesting and honestly like eye-opening when it comes to big transitions like this. And so now we're really getting into the last minutes of that interview. And so now it's time for a fun thing that we call our rapid fire question. So really the only rule is for you to give the first answer that comes to mind. So are you ready?
All right, yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let's go then. So what is a fun fact about yourself?
So, my fun fact is that I have sailed around the world on a ship. When I tell people that, their first question is always, "Oh my God, did you sail the ship?" And I did not. I was just a passenger, but I did a semester at sea while I was in college. So, in 2015, we did a semester-long voyage that started on the west coast of the US. So, we boarded the ship in Mexico, actually. And we sailed to like Hawaii, Japan, all through Southern Asia, around the tip of Africa, and we ended in Southampton, London area of the UK. So it took a few months and we visited, I think, 12 countries, but it was such a blast.
That's awesome.
I bet it was. What an opportunity. Amazing.
Yeah, it was. It really was.
Next one. So are you more of a movies or TV shows person?
Oh, definitely TV shows. I can't sit through a 2-hour movie, but I can sit through 5 episodes of a of a series on Netflix. That's definitely me.
I can totally relate.
So what would you say to someone who's having a tough week at work?
Oh man. Well, today is Friday. So that's what I would say is just, put your head down, get to Friday, unplug for the weekend and just get ready for the next week.
Cool. What is your favorite season?
Oh, I would say fall. Fall's my favorite.
I
The
mean,
best
being in the
weather.
Midwest.
Exactly. Best weather, best, scenery. It's football season, all the good, like pumpkin food. I like fall a lot.
Good answer.
And finally, you already shared one, so maybe another one, but what is the best career advice you ever received?
I mean, drawing off of what I already said, I guess the best advice I got was just don't be afraid to hear out any opportunity. Um, don't be afraid to try something new. And I guess the other thing would be like, don't be afraid to make career decisions uh, based on like your life and your personal circumstances. What's good for someone else might not be good for you. What's good for you might not be good for someone else. Like just using the academic track as an example, that's what we learn a lot of as grad students and postdocs is kind of the traditional grad school postdoc faculty path. And I knew immediately that that was not for me. And so I'm fortunate to have had people that were supportive of that. And, it's okay. Different strokes for different folks. It's okay to do what you actually want because we only get one life. So you have to be happy with yourself every day. And it's okay to do something different or non-traditional.
Yeah, it is.
Amen to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, and you touched on this too, prior, but it's also the mindset of, like previous generations that your one job was going to be your whole career, and it's not the case anymore. And, like you might have like 3, 4, 5 different careers in a lifetime. And so I fully agree that if an opportunity comes, don't, think it's beneath you or you're not good enough for it. Just go for it. Worst case, it doesn't work out. Best case, it does work out and you learn a ton of things. So thanks for sharing this.
100%. Yeah, and I'll say too something. I think sometimes you have to really play out like your worst fears. When I was deciding to take this job, it's like, okay, what is the worst? How bad could this be? Like what's the absolute worst case scenario? And I'm like, well, the worst case scenario is like I get a few months into this and I just hate it. But at least you know, my life's not going to be in danger. I'm going to have a paycheck. I'm going to have, you know, like everything is going to be okay. Plenty of people, you know, we don't want to be unhappy, but it happens. And if that's the case, you can always change course. But sometimes you really have to like play that out in your head because sometimes we definitely suffer more in imagination than in reality. So,
Yeah, and you don't know if you're gonna like it before you actually try it. So you did great. Like
exactly.
you try it, you like it, you stay. You don't like it, next.
Hmm.
Yeah. Again, thank you very much, Emily, for being there with us today and sharing your journey from bench science to sales. So just a reminder for our audience, please do not hesitate to connect with Emily to talk about sailing or with follow-up questions about her career, and follow our LinkedIn page for more episodes. With that, I say see you next time, Anne-Sophie, and Emily, see you maybe in 10 years to see where you're at. And thank you
Yeah.
again.
Thank you. Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
guys.
Bye.